In this episode of my Chevy Astro adventure van build series, I'll be building the shelving and storage areas. I'm going to start with the shelving system that will sit between my bed and the back of the driver's seat. This part of the shelf will be floor to ceiling and half as deep as the bed. I've chosen the width of the shelf based on the distance between the front of the bed and the back of my driver's seat. The more you like to lean back in your seat, the less shelf space you'll leave yourself. I'm using a belt sander to round off all the edges of the boards that face outwards. This board is too big for the belt sander, so I'll be doing this board with an orbital sander. These long clamps are a necessity when doing woodworking like this to help keep boards in place when drilling pilot holes, screwing them down, and especially when using glue. And now I need to figure out what height I want my shelves to have. I'm not really sure what I'll be putting here yet, so I'll just assume that I'll need to make some adjustments to these in the future. And this piece will be the back of the shelf. It won't go to the floor though, only from the bed to the ceiling. Uh-oh. It won't fit. I'm gonna have to take it apart and reassemble it inside the van. Taking the shelf apart only takes a few minutes, and now I can turn it upright. Now I can put the side panel back on, which goes much faster the second time. And now I need to attach the back of my shelves. That's the shelf built, and now I'll just slide it into place. Next, I'll start building the shelving that will fit behind the bed and in between the wall and shelf that I just built. I'm building this frame, which will be the bottom of the shelf. Clamp down the wood, screw it into place with construction screws. And now I'll just slide this frame into place and see how it fits. Curved walls and the lack of anchor points on the walls are going to make this a challenging space to work with. And now I'm working on the bottom side of the frame I just built. I want to make a removable top to this part of the shelf so I can access this storage space beneath it. My first attempt at this involves using these little hinges connecting the removable top to the frame. I can tell these won't hold up over time, especially not when screwed into the side of a piece of plywood like this, but I keep going and eventually build a version of this that works. More on that later. Next, I'll add this piece of wood to act as the back of the shelves I'm building. I can just slide this into place, but as you can see, there are a lot of contours on the wall and the ceiling to match, so this is going to take several attempts. To match up the contours of the wall and the ceiling to my sheet of wood, I'll use this piece of cardboard and make a template. This isn't going to be perfect, but it will get me close. I'll trace the template onto the wood, and I'm using painter's tape on the underside of the wood beneath the line I'll be cutting to help cut down on splintering when I make my cut. Before I get too far into my shelf build here, I need to run the wires for my dimmer switch, which will operate an LED light that will be built into my shelves. So I've connected my dimmer switch to the wires. Now it's time to screw it down. This is one of the LED lights I'll use in the shelf, and now I need to drill a hole for the light in the wood so I can mount it. There's a lot of this kind of thing that happens during a build, so let's try that again. So I'll drill this hole to route the wires to the light. Now I've got the hole drilled and the LED light is mounted. On the bottom side of the shelf, I have another piece of wood that acts as a spacer to give me the clearance I need to mount my light here. Back to the tall vertical shelf. It's time to screw in the bottom piece of the shelf that's going behind my bed. And now I'll install the top shelf. And here's the back side of the shelves. One nice, clean, smooth surface. Next, I'll button up some of the electrical wiring that was routed here. I'm taping up the wires, adding wire loom, and using tie wraps to keep this all in place. And I've built these goofy looking wood pieces to cover up the connections I've made in the wires. Basically a poor man's junction box. Now it's time to move on to the space above my power center. I'll be building my main shelving area here. This time-lapse gives you an idea of how many times I had to make cuts and adjustments to nearly every piece on this build in order to get things to fit properly. Here, I'm adding a block of wood next to my vertical boards, so I have something to mount the boards to. Now, it's time to make sure everything is cut straight and flush before screwing it down. I've also decided to bring the ends of the shelves in a few inches from the ends of the power center, so I can make some cubby holes in storage on this face. This will give me the space I need to install some electrical components, while also giving me valuable storage space here where I need it most, immediately when opening the sliding door. Everything here requires a custom cut. Nothing is straight and square. Next, I play around with the fit and placement of things I need to mount here. The dimmer switch for overhead lights, battery monitor. I'll mount these two components on one piece of wood. I use a hole saw to cut the hole for the battery monitor, slide that into place, and secure it into position. Next, I'll cut the hole for my dimmer switch using my oscillating tool. These are great for making cuts that are straight and precise in tight spaces. After sanding the edges of the board, I'll mount it to the side of my shelves. Now it's time to complete the wiring for the dimmer switch. Then mount the switch, and finally mount the battery monitor. And now I'll just cut a few more trim pieces to complete the side of the shelves here. And here's a look at the shelving area above the power center. Fortunately, items on the shelf will hide the sloppiness of the build in the back. And here's a look at the completed shelves in the front. So I've added some foam padding to the bottom of the shelf and a cork backing to the back wall of the lower shelf. And for this bottom cabinet here, this is more of a storage space. And one thing I wanted out of that was access from the top. So what I did was I just made a little piece of wood here and screwed down a little piece of fabric. And this just comes right off. You can open this or actually take it right out. And it provides easy access to some electrical wiring I have back here. And if anything else is buried back here, I've got easy access. Just grab it from the top. Okay, so for these shelves, since this is a van and it's going to be moving, got to figure out a way to keep stuff in the shelves while you're driving. So what I did is I put some nails in the side of the shelving and got some shot cord and just ran it through these nails. And this has been working pretty well for me. It's very simple, it's very cheap, and yeah, I mean, it does the job. You can kind of customize this too. You know, if you want, you put another nail here, a nail here, you know, remove this nail, whatever you want to do. And that's kind of what I've done here. You know, this one covers the center of it, this one covers the whole thing, and this one here, it only goes up to here. It doesn't cover the whole thing, so you can reach in and get things like bags of chips and things. And for storage under the bed, I'm just keeping it simple and going with kind of an array of storage bins. I've just gone to the store and picked out just a random variety of these bins and just kept kind of sort of a trial and error thing. You know, buy a few and see which combination of bins fits the space the best for you. You'll also notice these pieces of oak. There's one here, one over there, one on the other side of this. And I had initially built these so I could run like a board across these to keep the bins from sliding out while I'm driving around. But I found that they stay in there pretty well as they are. And I stopped using those boards altogether. But I did leave these things in the way because they kind of act as a stopper. So they keep at least the sides from coming out. And that seems to be enough, you know, having some sort of tension with all the other ones in here so that they all don't come flying out when I'm driving around. This is basically the bulk of my storage area. And this bottom shelf here, I've got a 5-gallon bucket. This is for my rock hounding stuff when I'm doing that. And the rest of this I kind of use for clothes. And I've got this big net here, so when this is all jam-packed with clothes, in fact, I can do this. It can be bulging out to here and still keep everything in, so that's kind of handy to have. And to keep it all in place, I've gone pretty low tech. I've just screwed these anchors into the wall here and then used this elastic band to just go around and provide some tension here. And it just loops around, and I'm using one of these little clips here, and then you just pull it around that. You can kind of see what that's going for there. So, and then yeah, you just wrap it around, and you know, pretty quick and simple if I want to get anything off the shelf. But it does a great job at keeping stuff from coming off the shelf. And then I did the same thing up here, just I had a few more of these clips, which I really like. It's just they came with this netting, which by the way is made by a company called Organized OBIE, O-B-I-E, Organized OBIE. They make a lot of cool products like this netting here. And as you can see, I've decided not to bring my shelf all the way back to the end of the power center here. And I've left myself about, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches here. And this is enough to put like a little garbage can here, and then I've got another little elastic band here or whatever to go around there and kind of keep this in place. And then the whole purpose of this really is to keep like tall, long things like fishing poles. I keep my fishing poles back here. I've got my ice axe and some tent poles and like hammock poles and things like that. So it's a good space to store those long vertical things. There's not a lot of storage space in this van, so my answer to that is this toolbox. Mounted that up on this roof rack. So I'm going to put things in here that I hope to not have to use very often, but I really need to carry, like toe straps, jacks, things like that I don't want cluttering up the inside of my van. So here's a look inside my toolbox. Got a hammock, some extra garbage bags, gloves, pry bar, leather boots, old chair, garden hose, and some rock hounding stuff here. I've got my hard hat from when I do underground mining, you know, oil spout, things like that. And I've added this piece of angle aluminum here, bolted the angle aluminum to the roof rack, and now I can bolt the toolbox to the angle aluminum and remove the toolbox when necessary, because many garages are about this high. So if I have the toolbox on, I can't fit in a standard garage. So I need to remove this if I want to store the van for long periods of time. So I also installed this cargo netting, and I ran one big board across because I've only got vertical pieces of wood for support that I can drill into on that side and this side, and nothing in the center. And by putting a long piece of wood across, I can put another clip here, even though this isn't drilled in the board behind it into the wall. Because this board is rigid on its own, it does give me the support I need to make the net work like this and kind of prevent things from falling out. And because this is such a small van, you need to be creative with your storage space and utilize all these little like nooks and crannies, because this is otherwise just wasted space. You know, you're not going to put anything there, you're not going to sit there, it's not in your way. So at least you get something for that space, you know.